I'm building a 2-trailer tiny house and it's time for a build update. And this is the one you've been waiting for, the shower scene. The shower's complete, which is really exciting because this is my first complete area in the house. The shower's a full 900 by 900 and it's built out over the drawbar of my trailer. I built a nook into the front here and a skylight in the front half of the shower here, which is really cool because it floods the shower full of light and lightens up these dark panels, but also creates this really soft glow into the bathroom, which looks really nice and you can't see where it's coming from. It also helps dry out the shower during the day in between use. Now the skylight also allows me to hide my ventilation. Instead of having a white plastic vent up in my ceiling, which I just hate the look of, I've been able to cut a vent into the side of the recess and put a fan on that and ducted it straight out through the roof, which is great because it's sucking all of the steam straight out of the shower. It doesn't have to waft out into the bathroom. Now the skylight does a great job of lighting up the shower during the day. During night, it's a bit dark in here. And because I'm trying to hide all of my lighting, I don't have any lights in the middle of the bathroom that's illuminating the shower. So instead what I've done is I've put this LED strip up here into the ceiling of the shower, which creates this really nice glow down to the shower and more than ample light at night time. The other place I put a light was inside my nook here, which to be honest, provides no function other than it just looks really Gucci. Now, if you're following along much earlier in the build, you remember I was looking at automating my shower and I got a long way down that path. In fact, I sort of made the unit up and I was about to start writing code, but I really had to question if it was the best use of my time because I just need to finish the damn house. So I decided to park that and instead I've just gone with a tap. In fact, I found a really cool progressive mixer, which is just a dial that you turn from cold through to warm all the way up to hot. And it's gonna match some of the other things I'm gonna do with my light switch as well. I'll come back to you later. So just a simple brass dial on my wall, which looks really nice. And it goes really nice with the brass rain head shower that I've got coming down out of my ceiling here. But anyway, that's enough about how it looks and feels. Let's go check out how I built it. So to line the interior of the shower, I've used a wet area paneling called wall art. Now, this stuff is just a composite material with a pattern printed on the front of it. If you've ever seen those sheets of tiles that look absolutely horrendous, it's this stuff. However, I found two colors that look really good, concrete matte and slate matte. Now, this is only a 3mm composite. It's super lightweight, you can cut with a saw, and it's super durable, which is awesome for a tiny house. Now, this will mark a bit easier than tiles, but still it takes a lot to get a mark into this stuff, and it looks awesome inside the shower there. Now, for the floors, I've actually gone with a tile. Now, normally tiles are a no deal for a tiny house because just too much weight, but this is what I've done. I've gone with a 5mm thick hexagonal mosaic tile. Now let's be clear, these are not a floor tile, they're a wall tile. However, this is my theory. To crack a tile, you need to create a pressure differential across the tile. So you might have a point load in the center of the tile pushing down harder on the inside than the outside, that causes it to crack. However, with such a small tile, because these are only about 20mm wide, it's going to be pretty hard to get a point load on these tiles to get a differential to make them crack. Now, what's more likely to happen is the grout between the tiles are going to crack. However, that's easy to repair. Also, I've used a flexible adhesive to stick these tiles down. I've then used a flexible grout and an additive that adds flexurial, I don't even know how to pronounce it, flexible strength, so structure to the grout that allows it to flex a little bit so that I get a nice strong grout that's also a little bit flexible and allows for any movement I might get in the tiny house. Now, these still add a little bit of weight, but being only 5mm thick mosaic, they're much, much lighter than floor tile, and I think they look pretty good. So the first step was to line the shower with plywood. So I've used a 6mm marine ply to try and keep it light, and it's more than strong enough with my 450 center stud. So I cut up the pieces of plywood and then stuck them into the shower recess. Now, one of the things I did was, as I was cutting up that plywood, is I actually cut up a template that I would come back and use later when I was cutting out my wet area paneling, because I only get one chance when I was cutting that. So with the plywood in, it's time to start waterproofing. And I've waterproofed the entire thing from the top to bottom. Now, I've gone right up into that roof window area. And the reason for that is, first of all, while I don't need to go that high, I'm gonna have condensation forming on that glass. And if that runs down, I'm gonna silicon my, my wet area paneling to that. But if it gets behind that, I wanna make sure that any moisture that ends up on top of the waterproof membrane. So I've actually taken the waterproof membrane all the way up to the glass. Then on the opposite side where I've got the opening to my ventilation, I'm gonna get condensation there. Now while I'm sealing all of that up so I don't get any condensation behind my paneling, if it does, same thing again, I make sure all of my moisture is on the outside of the waterproof membrane. So I work my way from the top all the way down. I used a polyurethane sealant to bond break in all of my corners and then reinforce the corners with 100mm fiberglass. So the waterproofing done, it was time to start lining the interior of this thing. The first thing I did was to set my grate drain. So I created a mortar bed that I set the grate drain down into, and I set that height above the floor to be equal just a little bit less than the thickness of tiles plus adhesive. So that when I put the tiles down, they're gonna be just a little bit proud of the drain and water can flow down into it. Now I set my grate drain before I did the wall paneling because I actually wanted the wall paneling to line up perfectly with the drain so it lines up nice and neat and I don't have any area around the drain where I've got really narrow bits that I have to try and tile. With the drain set, I could then get in here and do the wall paneling. Now I used the template that I made before, but I first fine-tuned it given that I've now got waterproofing in here, which reduces the size a little bit. And then I transferred it onto my wet area paneling and cut that out. Now to stick these on, I've used 11FC, which is a polyurethane adhesive. I run a V-bead all the way around the edge of the panel and then a minimum every 100mm up and down the panel so I get a nice bed of adhesive to hold these panels on. Now I did both side panels at the same time. This allowed me to set the two panels in and then use perfectly cut spacing pieces to set the distance between my panels from top to bottom. Now the problem with the wet area paneling, because it's so thin, if you don't get these level when you're bedding it down into the polyurethane, you can easily get a wavy wall. So to get the distances right, on the back side of the shower, I cut out the back panels at exactly the right width that I could push in and they would space out my side panels perfectly from top to bottom. Then on the opposite side here, I decided to make the level of my wet area paneling perfectly level with this brass edging here. Now, I like making things difficult for myself. What I should have done is just put the wet area paneling shy of that brass edging and just run a bead of silicone down there. Now, it's the one thing that people comment on when they come look at the shower and they're like, how the hell did you get that level? And it looks amazing. I'm really glad I did it because the finished product looked brilliant, but it was a nightmare to do. Now, what I had to do is cut up a heap of spacing pieces that were a little bit oversized that I could wedge between these brass edgings here that would push against the brass edging and then pushing the wet area paneling down in to the same level as the brass edging. Now, to get the walls nice and level, I made up these square forms of bracing pieces that would push against the walls and make sure that the walls all the way top to bottom were nice and straight. They referenced off the front and back edge, and then the plywood would push the walls of the wet area paneling in to get it nice and straight. And with enough of those, plus some checking as I went along, it created a nice, beautiful straight finish. With the side panels done, I then could do the back. I did the top and the bottom panel, but the problem with this is I couldn't sort of push spacing pieces out onto the panel like I did with the side ones. So I used steel with my ceiling props to push up against the wall to get my two sides nice and straight. Then I use a straight edge to reference off those sides that I've got nice and right to get the center of those nice and straight to make sure that my panel is nice and flat and I don't have any lumps in it. With the back done, I had to then get in and do in around that roof window area, which was just a lot of cutting and shaving small pieces, getting in there, checking it, shaving it down till I got it right. I could then stick them in with some polyurethane and we were done. So wet area paneling done, it's time to move on to the tiling. And this is what almost broke me. So the problem I had was when I set my grate drain, I set it at just the right height, tiles plus adhesive. But what I didn't allow for was my change of mind when I decided to put a piece of brass on top of my grate drain instead of tiling it. Getting a nice brass drain, it's gonna look pretty cool. The problem with that meant is raise my drain up a little bit. Now I thought that's okay because I've got heaps of slope on my shower base. I could just slope the tiles, sort of level them out a bit and bring them in so that it was sort of level with the grate drain. It just meant I had a less of a slope for sort of the second half of my tiles. Now, I thought I could just build that up with glue when I was doing it. If I was using large tiles, I probably would have got away with that. Mosaics, No deal. These things were a nightmare. I tried to build it up with glue and it just became a disaster. The tiles are pressing down into it and a glue going everywhere. And my first attempt, I just had to rip all of that out, threw the sheets away, and then I screeded out the glue to try and create a gradual slope down into that drain. Now, second day, I came back and decided to lay the tiles. I was conscious of that slope, so I made sure I checked it as I was laying it. The next day, I came back and grouted it, and the day after, I decided to do a flow test. And that's when I discovered it. My shower decided it wanted to be a lake. It wouldn't flow away. With a shower, you're always going to get some residual water on the floor due to surface tension, but after a little bit of drying, you shouldn't have a puddle. And I had a puddle. It was almost 4 millimeters deep, which is way too much. And at that point, I almost cried, but I knew there was only one option. That was just to redo it. That meant getting a hammer and a chisel and knocking out over 1,200 tiles. And these things were stuck well, I can assure you. Now, I didn't use a power tool to get them out because I didn't want to damage that waterproof membrane. Because if I damaged that, I was screwed because these wall panels are in and I don't want to damage the waterproof membrane on the floor, and repairing it was going to be difficult. So one by one, I had to remove all of those tiles with a hammer and chisel. That was just one of those experiences on this house that I hope never to have again. With the tiles removed, I then did what I should have done initially and screeded the floor properly. Now, I couldn't screed this with a proper screed because I didn't want to put it over top of the glue. It's a flexible adhesive. I didn't want that screed to break up. So I decided just to use the same glue. Now, I could get away with doing that because I wasn't exceeding the maximum thickness of the adhesive, but the problem with it is adhesive is not designed to screed, and trying to get that thing level was an absolute nightmare. So it was a slow, tedious process for a good half a day, leveling that out, troweling it off to try and get a nice level base that then I could come down and put adhesive onto. Let me explain a little bit better. We express fall-in showers in a ratio. So for a fixed screen shower, we want 1 in 100, which means over 100 centimeters, the floor will drop down by 1 centimeter. Now, I didn't want any trouble in my shower, and so I built fall into the floor at 1 in 50, which means over 100 centimeters, it actually dropped down by 2 centimeters. Now, when my drain was a little bit too high, what I intended to do was sort of build up some glue so that second half of the floor was still sloping down, just at less of an angle. What I did wrong was to not bring that back far enough. So that meant this little piece here actually sloped backwards, and that's what created the lake in the middle of my shower. What I did to fix it, and what I just should have done from the start, was actually screed from the edge of the drain all the way back up to the top, so I got a nice straight line down into my drain. And with even lifting that up, I still got 1 in 70 fall in my shower, which is heaps. Now, my tip for dealing with mosaics, I've done other tiling, but I haven't really done much mosaics, was just get your base right so that you can put down a layer of adhesive and bed them down into it. Do not try and compensate for any uneven or undulation in the floor. Do a screed, do some level floor, do what you've got to do to then just be able to screed your adhesive on and just set your mosaics in that. Because I tell you what, second time or third time trying to lay these tiles around, it was much easier just to screed out my adhesive and lay the tiles. So I laid them in, got them set, come back and grouted it. And when I come and did the water test this time, it worked. Thank goodness, because otherwise I was going to burn this house down. And I joke, but I'm not joking. With the tiling complete and all the lining done, all that was left to do was to cap this baby off with a shower screen. This was a really straightforward process. I attached the brackets to the wall. I could then install my side panel using glazing wedges to keep it up off of the tiles. I then attached the hinges and I could come in with the main door and hang that onto the hinges. Once it was hung, I used a pump up airbag to lift up the door, move it around and adjust it before clamping into the hinges, attach the door handle, and we're all good. Now I do need to come back and run a bead of silicone down along the wall and at the base of the side panel, but I come back and do that later once I've sealed my tiles. So that's the shower complete. I can't tell you how exciting it is to actually have an area inside the house that's just 100% complete. In fact, from this point forward, we're going to start seeing more of those now happen as I work through and finish things inside the house. The next step is to finish off the lift up bed in the bedroom there, which I've almost finished, and then I'm waiting on my joinery. So I'm getting cabinetry that goes in between the bedroom and the bathroom here, forms a wall and the wardrobe, and the kitchen there. Now, I've designed and drawn up all of that, but I'm getting a cabinet maker to cut it out, because to be honest, they can just put push it through the CNC and it's dead perfect, which is a much better use of my time than just cutting that out on a saw. But once they've cut that out, then I'll assemble it all and build it all in. I'm also making up all of my bench tops as well. And that'll be really cool because it'll almost finish the main trailer, and then the side trailer here, it'll separate the bedroom and the bathroom finally, and I'll get a real sense of what the space is actually going to be like inside this house. So I've got heaps of work to do. You guys know the drill. Don't hate, educate. Comment down below if you see something from the video can be improved, or if you've got any questions about how to done the shower. Except for the tiles. Don't comment on those tiles. They're too triggering for me. If you're one of those crazy buggers still watching, make sure you show us those two hands in the comments. In the meantime, go build cool stuff, and I'll see you guys again soon.